Oh, right. Okay. You see, I thought it wasn't working at first, and I was like, then I thought I'd fixed it, so I gave the introduction, then I gave it again. So I could introduce this for the third time, but I think we're just going to roll with it. Yeah. So today, we are going to be, well, I'm going to be responding to some vegan street interviews. I want to see if I can do it because I've had this suggested to us before. And yeah, I just want to give it a go more than anything. I think it's something that I'm going to try doing regardless. And I know that this won't be an accurate measure of whether I can do it. But let's see if I've got anything I could say to these interviewees. So today I thought I would respond to Humane Hancock's video interviewing some hippies at a vegan festival. I haven't watched too much of Humane Hancock stuff, but I've heard he's a cool guy. And yeah, so I thought we could just get into it. Yeah, so actually, before we do that, let's have a quick make sure that it actually even works. So we'll try making sure that that's not muted. And yeah, we go. You see, I thought I'd play this bit just so you've got like a feel for what's going on. Really, because I think it kind of gives a better introduction to the thing than I ever could. I don't think that I could necessarily describe an event like this with accurate measure, because I know I have kind of been to a hippy dippy kind of event before, but it was a raw event, and it was what it was a vegan festival, but it was also a raw vegan festival. And, well, I can honestly say I felt a bit out of place. Like, there was people trying to sell us, like, I'm not even joking, like, trying to tell me to, like, join this new religion in which we understood, like, this guy to be, like, the rebirth of Jesus. But he's also the rebirth, like, Jesus, Muhammad, like, every one of these guys was supposed to be, like, this guy's previous form. And this was his, like, final form. So, yeah, like, it's definitely something, not something I'm really like, I really get into, but I'm really looking forward to like responding to some of the people here, because I think a lot of them are actually like, they're not stupid. They just have a different outlook on things, and you should be able to, I think, talk to everyone, and I don't think there's anything wrong with people expressing their spirituality, and if they want to express it in a different way, that's absolutely fine. Although I do think that, as you can see, it's almost hyper aesthetic. There's like a definite like way of life that's tied to these things, to these events, and it's rare to see people like just rock up wearing like normal everyday clothes. Like normally you go to events like this and everyone's in like sandals and, you know, very flowy t-shirts. Well, you know, we'll see what happens.
What does spirituality mean to you? I guess.
Yeah, let's see. Like spirituality is kind of like what I thought this would kind of be about. I mean, he says like vegan irritates spiritual hippies. This idea of like spirituality, it's something that we do lack in contemporary culture. One of my friends was hoping to do some, I don't know if he says doing his PhD on it. Like spiritual language games. So like Wittgensteinian like approach to spiritual language games. Trying to create a way of expressing a spiritual life without religion. I thought that'd be quite interesting. So
Yes, it would just be getting in touch with yourself, sharing love and acceptance, just getting in touch with the universe, I guess.
Getting in touch with the universe. Well, like I think you did bring up some good things there, like this idea of getting in touch with yourself, you know, expressing love and being in touch with the universe. I feel like that has to be ethics incarnate. Like, I mean, it describes almost everything if you include the universe, to be fair. But ethics especially, this idea of like understanding yourself and being like in touch with yourself, I feel like that's a way of... I I take a view of self-knowledge that may be very different to most people, but I see self-knowledge as almost like a way towards pragmatism, in a pragmatic way. Like, the better I know myself, the better I can live my life. And I think that most people kind of have this kind of approach, but a lot of people just think that they can only describe themselves and that they can't really do anything about who they are. Well, I don't take that approach. I see myself as like, if I understand who I am, then I know better how to make myself who I want to be. And I think in the case with veganism, I think that understanding who I was as a meat eater is what gave me this understanding of being able to go, you know what, my actions aren't aligning with my views. Like, I believe in equality, I believe in liberty, and I believe in, like, you know, moral objectivism in this sense. How can I align that with, how could that possibly align with eating and killing, you know, sentient beings? And if it was that self-understanding that allowed me to liberate myself from those, you know, ideologically implicit behaviors of, you know, consuming animal products, which I had never really questioned to like the fullest degree. So I think self-knowledge especially is a very ethical concept.
Spirituality means a closeness to something other than science, something that can't be explained by science.
Oh, that's something strange. So he's like, it's almost like he's pointing towards a different aesthetic ideal. So as if it's something that cannot be explained by science. As if the spiritual by definition could not involve anything scientific, or that the scientific could never maybe become spiritualism. And I think that's maybe a bit like distant, like from maybe how I would see spiritualism. But, you know, I don't think it matters a great deal. But it's interesting to hear people's different interpretations of what spiritualism is.
Come up a lot as a sense of oneness with the people around us. Is that something that you feel?
Yeah, definitely.
And another thing we're talking about is how we extend that circle of compassion we have. Do we extend it further to, say, non-humans as well, like animals?
Yeah, definitely.
So do you believe there's a message in spirituality about how we should treat the animals we live with?
Yeah, definitely.
And do you think that generally we do extend our circle of compassion to other animals?
I'd say spiritual people do, and other people, it really is very individual. Yeah.
At the moment, human.
This is an issue that he might run into there, like with them saying that it's very individual. Like, alarm bells just started ringing off in my head. Like, please don't be subjectivists. Because, I mean, spiritualism, yeah, I can understand how that would be quite subjective. Like, perhaps like how you express that, like, sublimity in your life, like the divinity within yourself. But necessarily saying something like, you know, like, it depends on how far you stretch it. It's very individual. I can instantly they could just turn around later on and go, well, that's your understanding of spiritualism. So I do hope that he doesn't just say like spiritualism, and he does say like, well, like, do you not think, what is the value of spiritualism essentially? Why do we want to be spiritual? Because I think that the beautiful thing about ethics is so long as you can get people to question their values and why they do things, then we're in ethics. We're already there. So we'll see.
Are destroying the earth, and I feel like to be truly spiritual, you have to think about Mother Earth and what it is and how to protect it.
You include Mother Earth and the people around you in your circle of compassion.
See, like, my question there would be like, well, why do we care about the earth? And I'd hopefully be able to get him, like, if he didn't say like, we care about the earth because of, or, you know, all the animals that live on it, he'd probably say even something like, it's inherently like the beauty or whatever it is, the majesty of nature. But then I would say like, you know, what's more important, you know, like something that's beautiful or something that's, you know, that feels and so on maybe. But I guess like most people tend to say that like, you know, Earth's our home. Like, we need to take care of our home because, well, we're reliant upon it. And it's like, well, so it implies instantly that we'll have a care and ethical understanding of each other. And then I think it's not a hard stretch to ask the question, well, do you think it matters towards animals as well, like habitats? And do you care about, let's say, the extinction of wildlife? And they go, yes, okay. And then you can kind of ask them, well, why do they care? And that's kind of like the way of questioning that I would probably want to entail if I was to do this. Although, like, it's a lot easier said than done. So we'll see like which way he goes, because as I said, I've not really watched too much Human Hancock, but he seems to be doing a great job. Job.
Definitely.
And that's part of your spirituality.
Yeah.
Does your spirituality extend further to non-humans?
You see, I would quickly drop the word spirituality, just because I think that once you're in this like kind of like realm of the spiritual, or like, you know, this realm of like faith and you know, really undefinable experience, and I think that's how I would kind of like put the spiritual, because it is a relation to like sublimity or divinity, and in which case like it becomes incredibly personal, and it has more to do with the individual themselves and how they interact within the world. And so like, you don't want to get tied into what is spiritual and what isn't spiritual. You want to say like, well, why are you spiritual? Like, what does spiritualism do for you? Okay, and it gives you this connection, this understanding, and that's what they're going to talk about, like a broader understanding. I'm like, well, why do you want a broader understanding? It's like, well, to know like your place within the universe, you know, to understand how you can act and express like the values you hold. And that's when I would always try and get onto the ethical. Like, you don't want to end up in some sort of like quasi-religious sphere of like language where you can literally just talk straight past each other.
Yes. I mean, yes, it does. I think I need to be better in my connection with animals, and obviously like with Mother Earth, we're all connected.
So let's say the way we use animals for, say, food or fashion. Do you think
Someone says the video I'm playing sounds a bit quiet, so tell us.
there's a contradiction there between spirituality and...
How's that? Is that better, guys?
Certainly, like big farms and the way they treat animals is very inhumane generally.
Yeah.
There's not a lot of option for.
Was the sound better there, guys? Just because I don't want anyone not hearing it, if that's possible. Ooh. Still a bit low. Right, so I'm going to turn it right up here. And then if you need us to turn it down, guys, just let us know.
Having a humanely sourced animal product.
What would be a humane way to kill an animal for you? What would it look like?
That's like the very Earthling Eddie kind of question. Like, what is humane killing, you know? And I love that. We're going to go back just where he started here, just because I didn't know if everyone could hear like the questions there. But this is where we're getting on to where I think it needs to be. Let's see, you know, just in case, I'm going to make sure that all the sounds turned up. Yeah, it is. Right.
So let's say the way we use animals for, say, food or fashion. Do you think there's a contradiction there between spirituality and what we're doing?
Yeah, certainly.
I mean, it's nice to say, is there a contradiction between like spirituality and like what we're doing to animals? The issue, and I think that's good. I mean, I guess like the only way that I could point, like if I was going to argue this point on spirituality, then I would say that it's only in relationship to the divine that we feel like spirituality. And what is divinity is the alienation of all of our good qualities. You know, we see something that invokes within us like a reflection of ourself in the best possible way. Like when we see something that is like truly divine, I would say, like, I would take a Hegelian stance on that, you know, surprisingly, and say that we're seeing the alienated qualities of ourself that we admire. And with beauty, I would say that beauty's a lot harder, and this is the issue, because then it becomes an aesthetic appreciation. And this is why I think spirituality, it kind of combines like a little bit of aestheticism with the moral. So you can end up with people that are saying like, you know, beauty and, you know, the moral are pretty much the same thing in spiritualism. So it's almost like people have this, especially a lot of the time in spiritualism, have this like appreciation for nature, but in this way that where they want to harken back to the old days when we were hunter-gatherers, and there's something spiritual in killing an animal. And I do sense that like there's a lot of people that kind of have this approach, and then you end up speaking to hunters and they say there's something deeply meaningful about taking an animal's life with like a rifle or a bow and arrow or whatever it is they use. And it seems that you kind of end up on this point where if you say that it's not spiritual, they'll go, well, define spiritual. Well, you can't define what's spiritual because it's an individual experience, and you're buggered. And the only thing you can do is go, I think, and then no one cares what you think. Like, I don't agree. Well, see you later. So I think that's why you've got to get on to the ethical. And you've got to relate it back to their values. You don't necessarily have to even mention the word ethics. You don't have to say ethics, but just get on to the ethical, like why we're talking about this, like the values themselves.
Like big farms and the way they treat animals is very inhumane generally.
Yeah.
There's not a lot of option for having a humanely sourced animal product.
What would be a humane way to kill an animal for you? What would it look like?
That'd be a really difficult.
It's a tricky
thing
question.
to answer.
Yeah.
Like, obviously, there's.
I do like the idea of like pointing out this like lack of humanity even within animal agriculture. This notion that like it almost alienates who we are to do these actions to animals, and these behaviors are almost a rejection of ourselves. And I think that's maybe like a good way to frame it towards individuals who maybe that what they're caring about is their expression of self and their values. And I think everyone does care about these things, but I think at somewhere like a spiritual hippie festival, it's very much about becoming in touch with that inner individual. Now, I wouldn't be surprised, to be entirely honest with you, if things like this are not just in relation to the growth of secular society and individuals actually fleeing their responsibility from ethics in the first place. So people are probably going to get quite annoyed because they're really just looking for a way of life that tells them how to behave. And I think that's why it's a lot easier to find people like on these paths that, they're all religious, but they're all following like kind of fringe religions, because they feel like they want to be so individual. And that brings us on to the second point, the individualism within it. It's this trying to seek subjectivity, but at the same time not recognizing that subjectivity is actually the response. It is actually the individual within the world who behaves in such a way that reinforces their values and understands why they are acting in that way. And it's that deliberation and then that rational decision-making process that allows you to be a subject, that gives you your freedom. And I feel like a lot of the time, this individualism we see today in our, consumerist hedonist culture or our political reactionary system or hippies and subcultures in general, what it is an expression of individuality that actually just buys into a market, a whole group of ideological like norms and conventions laid out nicely, tied into an aesthetic in which you can adopt, and now everyone understands who you are. You think you're being deeply original, but in fact you're actually just a packet store-bought product that comes in a variation of colours. So I think that, and I mean that like as in clothes, not necessarily colours of skin, but it does breach culture, it does breach race, and it does breach all walks of life. And people don't realise how much not just capitalism has invaded our social spheres, but just ideology and how much it can control us and actually destroy our subjectivity. And it's an irony, and I think that's what Hegel says. This is the irony of the subjectivist.
Ideal way to kill anything. But I guess where the animal didn't realise it was being killed would be the optimum way of killing something.
I don't know.
It's really tricky.
I'm not sure if I agree with that, what you said, to be honest.
You see, as well, I'm just going to say this as well. It's not like just because, I've been part of a subculture myself. I used to be like an emo. It's not everyone, like, you don't join a subculture to necessarily, express yourself. Sometimes you just like the clothes, you like the fashion, you like the music, you like the expression of life. But what I'm saying is that real self-expression comes from your ethics. It's like, yeah, dress any way you want, right? Like, appreciate any taste you like. Be who you want to be, right? When it comes to like, how you want to live your life. But the real you, like the you that breaches that truly makes you this individual, this decision maker, is the one that is rational and actually acts in the way that adheres to the values you've discerned.
But I don't. I can answer that, yeah, I'm not.
Optimum way of killing something.
I don't know. I can't.
Being killed would be the optimum way of killing something.
The optimum way of killing something. Imagine hearing that though. Like, it would be it's almost like he's saying like it's the most. I think he'd probably be saying it's probably the least painful way. Like, and I think that's probably what he's trying to get at. That's what most people try and like point towards.
I don't know. I can't.
It's really tricky.
Yeah, I'm not sure if I agree with that, what you said, to be honest, but I don't. I can answer that, yeah.
Let's say I get a hypothetical for you then, and I've got like a dog in front of you now, and I get a gun out, and I say the dog is not going to know about this. Shoot the dog. Is there anything unethical about me doing that, by your standards?
Yeah.
Do you think it's...
You see, there we go. We're on that ethics. Like, is there anything unethical about me shooting that dog? Great. That's like genuinely like, I don't think there's anything better than dogs and cats for helping remove cognitive dissonance. They're like the best, like the best way to just communicate like the overall wrongness of the action, because it's almost like we're not so emotionally distant from these animals. Although I feel like there's a lot of people now, if you were to just say like, if I put a gun to like a cow's head, like right here, and just blew its brains out, would you be okay with that? I think there's very few people that would actually say they are okay with it, but even the ones that do, I think there's a lot of them who just genuinely wouldn't, but they'd want to seem like they genuinely didn't care. Like, I have a friend, and he said to me once, he was like, if there was a lamb right here, he's like, I'd slit its throat. He's like, just if I got all of that lamb. I was like, nah. I just call his bluff. I was like, nah, I don't think so. Like, I genuinely think if I put an apple on the table and then had a baby lamb over there, and you're telling me that before you ate the apple, before you like, ate, whatever vegan food was available, you'd actually murder that animal. Like, I don't believe that, like, he has that lack of empathy and compassion for the animal in the first place, like knowing him. And I think there's a lot of men especially that try to make that distance with that, I could do it. And it's almost like it proves their masculinity, it proves their like their power. And I think that it's, and like almost like their, their manhood. But it's like, how pathetic must you be in many ways? Like, and this was me, don't get us wrong. Like, this was me like ages ago. Like, I used to think of it as an expression of like, of manliness to be able to say that you could do these things. But like, mine was always posited like, well, if I had to, I could do it. And it's like, well, if I had to, I could do it. Like, I understood that. Like, I think I said to me mate, like, if I had to, I could kill him. But like, I don't, so I don't, And it's exactly the same with veganism. It's like, you don't have to, so don't do it, isn't it? Like,
somewhat a contradiction for a spiritual person to hurt animals.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
Definitely.
So do you consume any animal products?
Yes, I don't eat meat. I don't eat meat, but I have dairy. I think obviously we can survive without it now in this age. But I still feel like it's probably out of ease. I probably still have milk and cheese products.
it is good. Yeah. Like, he knows that it's purely convenience. Like, then all you got to do is go like, well, is convenience worth a life? Like, kind of get this, what is it, like, the whole Peter Singer quote on the go, isn't it? Like, is it okay to disregard the most vital interests of an animal for the most trivial of ours, like taste sensation? It's like, would you think it was okay to harm someone else for the fun of it? Like, do you think it's okay to like, graffiti on someone's house or smash up their car or, or beat someone for fun? Well, you didn't even kill them. So why do you think it's okay to kill an animal for fun? And I think that it's, it sounds absolutely, like, people will go, well, that's a human, it's not an animal. But that's where I think I'd want to question that, because it's all about getting people to expand their moral spheres and understand why we consider animals in the first place. Because I think some people who even do consider animals just go, well, it's wrong, isn't it? and it's almost an implicit ideological belief, and it's almost like they could just swap at any moment, given, you know, the right set of circumstances or the right, like, conversation with a hunter, you know, where they would only have to hear about how it was super spiritual and it made them feel like one with the earth, and they're like, oh, right, this is totally fine. Give them the right aesthetic ideal, and they'll be off, you know, rifle in hand. So I feel like you want to do is you want to breach that ideological stances and with critical thinking. You want them to question, like, why themselves. And I mean, like, until we do that, like, until we all do that, and we'll all have areas of our life where we still need to do it, like, especially, I think, like, it happens, like, more and more in philosophy, where I realize there's a whole branch of, like, thinking that I need to just apply to my existence, and I'm like, oh dear God. But at the same time, you've just got to try, and that's the only thing we can do. Like, sometimes you've got to just, especially with ethics, you've just got to try and apply the ethical, you know, decision-making process and get it underway, where you start just going why, and that infinite regress till you bottom out at, you know, the point that you are a subject. And until that point, I don't feel like you can justify anything.
You mentioned we don't need to. Do you think that there's an obligation not to harm animals if we don't need to?
I love that. You can probably see the cogs turning, like, as he was like, do we?
Do you think anything
is there
spiritual does happen in a slaughterhouse?
No, I very much doubt that anyone who works in a slaughterhouse is, like, thanking them.
Well, who cares if they're thanking them, right? Like, what if, like, this is a halal slaughterhouse? I mean, like, how more what level of spirituality could surpass a religious slaughterhouse, you know, where they, like, slit the throat of a sentient being, and they pray to God, and they give thanks to the animal and to God, and this idea of, like, you know, this intimate connection with the animal. It just sounds like it sounds so lovely compared, I mean, not really, but, like, it sounds so lovely compared to the idea of it just being a cold mechanical process. But in reality, what's changed? Absolutely nothing. It's exactly the same thing going on. Like, the animal's still getting killed. In fact, this time it's not being stunned, because the religious ideology allows them to say that actually the animal should be awake and fully conscious, so that they know they're being sacrificed to God, apparently. Or, you know, like, apparently it's supposed to be some sort of, it's part of the ritual, right? And so spiritualism does nothing but, you know, undermine ethics at this point. And this is the problem. Like, yeah, like, depending on the sincerity of the individual, like, if you stop a Muslim who's, like, spiritual, or you stop someone who's, like, you know, interested in these things, in animal, like, agriculture, and they're spiritual, even pagans, I think pagans sacrifice animals, and, like, certain other religions even sacrifice animals. Heard Hindus in some places still do it. So, like, you can imagine them doing, like, understanding, like, animal sacrifice to be an innate part of spiritualism. And what happens in a slaughterhouse could be considered spiritual. But because something is spiritual, does that make it okay? Like, does that make it right? Like, if it's an expression of, like, your ideological stance? Because that's the point. Like, you're being incredibly subjective there, to the point in which you're saying that your interests, your desires in regards to this animal are more important than the animal itself. I feel like you could make an argument to say that, like, when you use an animal as a means to an end, you are replacing the soul of that animal. By that I mean, like, the identity, the subject, the personality almost that would be implicit within the animal, with this understanding of self, because you make it your own. And by saying you own that animal, by making your property, what you are doing is an act against, you know, an object of your property, and no longer the animal. And you could say that by doing that, are you not destroying, you know, the innate spiritualism in the world, like the inherent, you know, the inherent consciousness that exists within beings? Is that not being annihilated and replaced with selfishness, with greed? And I think you could go down this route, but at the same time, like, I much prefer to just head straight into ethics and try and make sure that this doesn't double back, because I do feel like people might wiggle out, and I don't like people, like, you know, being insincere.
Do you think we have to, or do you think it's
You just slip that in there, like having to take its life to feed others.
a choice?
Obviously, it's a choice.
I think we should.
Everyone should be lovely to everyone else, and that should include animals. But obviously, it's a choice. Some people don't see the things the way other people would see them. They don't want to see that like an animal could have a soul or could have suffering. There's this whole thing about how things don't have feelings, like fish don't have feelings, and it's just ridiculous. Everything has feelings.
At least he said it for us. Like, you know, fish do have feelings. Will people stop thinking fish don't? I had this argument in real life with someone where they were like, don't be ridiculous. Fish don't feel, and it's like, what? Why? Just because they like have different like expressions or like different like, you know, like physical form doesn't mean they don't feel. That's a bit ridiculous. I think that does show like language is founded on this understanding of face-to-face communication, and it's how we understand subjectivity and how to recognize it like within the mechanism in which we are. So like, it's not surprising that people like struggle when the face is different to understand its ethical relevance. And I think that you know, I'm being converted. And I think that it really does like show you like that even like how things like, you know, tribalism happened, because a slightly different face could make all that difference.
Even plants have feelings.
Did he just say plants have feelings? No. Please tell us he did not say plants have feelings.
If I was beating the dog,
Yeah.
and I said it's my personal choice to beat this dog, would you
Yeah.
say, no, that's wrong? Or would you say it's your choice?
You see, that's kind of perfect. I'll give him his credit. That's kind of perfect, because it's like, is it objectively wrong, or are all morals subjective?
I think where you're getting beating a dog and eating chickens, cows. Bear in mind, I don't eat chickens and cows, but I think it's two separate things. To be honest, I think we should all I think we should all be vegan.
That was pretty good. Like, it didn't take him long. He's like, actually, no. clearly there is something in this.
I should be vegan as well, so I can't say I understand like what you're saying,
Yeah.
but I think
It's a
I
trick.
think people should also have a choice. And I know I don't think you can make the comparison of beating a dog and
What is the difference morally between me beating a dog or me killing an animal for food?
But like this idea of like everyone having a choice, it's like giving people like an ethical convention from which to abide gives them the choice. Like, people don't realize that like freedom isn't doing what you feel like doing. Freedom is doing what you know is right and you've decided is right, because otherwise you're a slave to your basic nature. Like, would you say that something like I wouldn't say you were born free. I don't think anything lives like free. Like, I don't think like a dog is free. I don't think a cat is necessarily free unless they were able to have like a deep contemplation about how to, live their lives and what path they should take. I think to express freedom in such a shallow way as getting what you want means that freedom can literally be anything. Like, the slave can be free if he was raised a slave. If he was given an ideological stance which enslaved him, and made him actually decide that, slavery is better than having to make the decisions for myself. I am inferior. I lack the capacity to be, an individual who makes these grand decisions. I need someone to make these decisions for me. And you might even have anxiety around freedom. This idea that like it would bring him angst and pain to even think about having to take the responsibility for the duties in which they live their lives. But that doesn't mean that it's freedom. He's still enslaved. His actions are being controlled by the will of another. He's not actually expressing anything of his own. He's expressing the will of another when he's commanded what to do, when he's coerced into action. So I don't see how he could. I don't see how an individual could even think that, you know, freedom is just being able to do what you want to do. Like, and they never talk about the freedom of like the animals, when, even in this regard. It's like, even if you did see them freedom in this shallow sense, like, well, why would our freedom come above an animal's freedom? Like, why do our desires come above like an animal's desires? And we need to talk about that. And I think that it's weird that people have this like kind of not only shallow conception of freedom, but also selfish conception of freedom, where they think that their freedom comes above other people's freedoms. It's like, well, I don't have the freedom to just walk into the street and murder someone. Why is that, you know? And maybe that's like probably what I would do in this scenario. I don't know if it's the right way to go. Maybe I make these conversations more complicated than they need to be. Maybe I could make them simpler and just appeal to like generic kind of like, do you think it is right? Or like not just do you think it's right, but maybe like, do you think that, like, would you do it? Like, would you kill an animal? And I could probably do it like, you know, just getting people to, you know, contradict their emotional states. But I kind of want people to think, like, I don't want people to go vegan on a whim, because then they can whimsically not be vegan again. So I want people to have like real deep contemplation, like go vegan because that's who they want to be. Like, they want to express like the goodness within them.
I mean, everyone's got to eat to live. Back when we were cavemen, we would have killed something to eat to live. So there is certainly an allowance for it to be moral to eat animals.
Yeah, but there's an allowance to kill people. Like, let's be honest. Like Hegel talks about like to deny someone the right, for example, to steal a loaf of bread to save their life would be immoral because you wouldn't be respecting their subjectivity in the first place. Well, I think you can go all the way up to, you know, self-defense for that, or something like where you are forced to, you know, kill to survive. These individuals, because they are subjects and they respect their own subjectivity, and their subjectivity is being respected by and acknowledged by others, when they're in the situation where they have no other alternative, they are given the option to do wrong. Now, that necessarily means that they might, like, for example, killing to survive. Is it right? Is it wrong? It's somewhat ambiguous when it's in that situation, because you have to work out whether it would be justified to expect anyone to sacrifice their life. Something that I don't think I can answer in this stream, but I guess the greater overall understanding of what I'm getting at is that, you know, it just seems, I don't know how to put it. I hope it's clear. But
certainly the way it's done at the moment, I don't think it's very moral.
Would you agree with me in saying that when our ancestors did it, it was a necessity?
Yes.
And would you agree with me in saying that in today's world, we could just leave them alone? We don't need to.
It's certainly feasible to live without animal products. Yes.
Yeah, like, I think that's good. Like, pointing that sort of stuff out. Like, you know, just the feasibility. Like, it's so easy now to be vegan. Like, I've never seen like so many vegan products. Like, I mean, I've only been vegan for 4 years. When I became vegan, there was like a few vegan products. Like, they weren't everywhere, but they were around. Like, the vegans in the 80s and the 60s and stuff, God bless them, they never got anything. Like, they were just eating vegetables. But the like veganism now, like, I can get pizzas and stuff. Like, even in 2012, not 2012, like 2014, 15, yeah. There was some products, like, you could get vegan cheese, you could get, like, you know, fake meats and stuff, and you certainly had things like you know, like, you can have like chocolate soy milk and stuff like that. So, like, you still had like some options and stuff, like kind of nice like treats and stuff. And, you know, there's always been them accidental vegan products, but like now there's so much deliberate vegan products where it's like you can go and get a vegan Papa John's, man. You can go and like stuff are labeling themselves vegan, like the Impossible Burgers coming out in like Burger King. It's like there's so much. So
if that is feasible, would you say it's a moral obligation to leave the animals alone?
Yeah, I would say so.
The word obligation is difficult because
it's always the word obligation that trips people up, isn't it? I like how she's just like straight up like, yeah, actually, yeah, this is how it's supposed to be. But you can see like maybe it's like this is right now the juxtaposition between why most women and men, like women compared to men, go vegan. Like it's something like 70% of vegans are women. You've got to ask yourself the question of why. Like, what is it about the psychology of men in contemporary society, or maybe the approach of activists, or, you know, whatever it is that's preventing men from going vegan? And I think a lot of that comes with the stereotype that men who are vegan are kind of emasculine, that they're like emaciated weaklings who care more about feelings than they do about, like, you know, being a strong, like, alpha, you know, who gets all the ladies. And, you know, almost I think a lot of men actually have this idea that women want a meat-eating man as well. I've seen that, like, where they're like almost this idea that they could like take a vegan's like girlfriend from just being a meat eater, you know. And it's like as if you're being more manly, like there's something that a woman would appreciate more there, for example. And it's just this like weird ideological indoctrination in which meat and masculinity are so interconnected. I think that it's difficult for men to distance themselves from that. I mean, look at Steak and Blowjob Day, for God's sake. You know, women get Valentine's Day in this sense. So it's like women get Valentine's Day. It's really for men and women, but women are supposed to get Valentine's Day. But then they're like, oh, Steak and Blowjob Day. Now, the beautiful thing is now, you could just turn around and go like, you can get a vegan steak. You know, like there's nothing stopping you. There's nothing stopping you now. And you just should not associate your personality so strongly with not only an ideological stance, but an ideological stance that causes such unjustified bloodshed.
Everyone accepts their own responsibilities individually. I think anyone who was really preaching an enlightened path would probably be quite obligated to do so.
But that's ridiculous. That's like everyone accepts their own responsibilities individually. And it's like, okay, everyone accepts responsibility individually in the sense that they can do wrong. Like, yeah, like, but they're still obligated to do the right thing. That doesn't mean that they have no other, like, volition. It's like, of course you can choose not to be vegan. Like, nobody's saying you have no choice, but that the right choice is to be vegan. And that's the point. Like, you are obligated. Like, there is nothing about you that justifies your, you know, use and exploitation of animals. There's nothing about them that justifies it either. So don't do it.
One is a death of torture, like beating a dog. Like that's basically making go prolonged harm.
Sure.
Whereas killing a chicken or something instantly is different.
Let me put that onto the dog then. I say I've got a dog in front of you, my pet. Gun out.
You know, I've just had a thought, guys. Let's see if this works, right? So, hey. So you should be able to see is here. I'm just going to quickly try something. Oh, no, I don't think that would work. Never mind. Right. Well, has anyone got any questions thus far? Are you enjoying it? Let us know. It's obviously I know that I do these things quite late, and that I think I do these things quite late, and you know, some people don't get a chance to watch them, and I'm really sorry about that. But you know, hopefully, like at least I'll make it through this video, and it'll be up for anyone to watch it later. I might do some genuine, like, I might do these things in the street. Like, would anyone like to see like street activism by me? Like, I was thinking about setting up like shop at a university, like, and having debates that way. Or do you think you'd rather see us like do outreach with like Anonymous for the voiceless? Because it honestly, I think I'd be better at the university ones, and I think you get some better responses. But Anonymous for the voiceless, like, there is the reality of what the animals are doing, like what is being done to animals, like right there, and it's unavoidable. And I think that's the beautiful thing about it. Debating the moral obligation of veganism, that's what I'd be debating. Like, it's something that I do online anyway. Like, I've I've already had like an open invitation. Like I've already sent out like an open invitation for anyone to debate us on veganism. Yeah, do some street activism. Yeah, I'll do it. Like I'll try both of them. I'll see what they're like and see which one does better. Like in terms of like reaching individuals, like people actually like understanding what I'm saying. Apparently academics are more likely to go vegan. I think that's because they're more willing to respond to a rational like argument. They're not willing to appeal to like emotion in the first place, which is why they've went into academia. But that being said, like, you know, there's a lot of like smart, intelligent, capable individuals who, you know, haven't been to university or even might just be from universities walking around the streets. And yeah, I'm vegan. Bureau says, wait, are you vegan? Yes, I'm vegan. I do vegan debates. Chris Grant, all the best philosophers are vegan. Oh, bloody hell. Oh, that was terrifying. I don't know if that worked. Yeah. But, yeah, I've been vegan for 4 years now. And honestly, it's the best decision I've ever made. Like, I feel like I was living a life of hypocrisy before I was vegan, and I didn't even see like the subjectivism, the sophism, the sophism in trying to defend a way of life that I inherently disagreed with in the first place, with the concepts that I held dear, with the values that I held dear. So, yeah, I'm very glad I went vegan. 4 years ago, in 5 days. So, yeah. Vohan, congrats. Looking forward to your vegiversary in August. 4 years, sorry. And Nathan says, I've done outreach at a Cube of Truth once. The hardest conversation was with a religious old man, probably in his 60s. He wasn't having it. Well, I was raised Catholic, so it depends on like who I talk to. I struggle to talk to like fundamentalists in general. Like when it comes to religion, I just find that absolutely pointless. Like there is nothing you're going to say that's going to get through to them, because they are there to convert you in the first place. Like everything you say is almost a lie told by Satan, unless you can say you're one of them. So I feel like the only way to like really get through to like, you know, Jehovah's Witnesses or you know, like whatever fundamental religion it is to kind of be part of the community in the first place. But, you know, there's almost like this kind of like silence that goes on within like, you know, religious institutions around these, you know, issues. I don't think so much. I think Catholicism's a little bit better, if I'm honest, just because it was kind of forced into the Enlightenment. Like it was going to get, you know, essentially disregarded. But then a lot of Protestantism is fine as well, like absolutely fine, like the same sort of like understanding of the Bible being the word of God, not the words of God. But it's you know, it's the reactionary Protestantism that came around to defend Protestantism from the Enlightenment, and this like understanding of like, you know, Puritanism, and you know, which led to like various other religions and offshoots, which eventually led to things like Jehovah's Witnesses and stuff. So, yeah, I think I'll try universities. I'm going to try universities, and you know, I'm going to think of I think I'll probably try the Cube of Truth as well. I think I tried NARC, like Northeast Animal Welfare Cooperation, but I don't like their approach so much. But I really do like the approach of having the footage there. Bureau says the cult of veganism has quite similar aspects as most religions too. Well, it's weird because you see veganism as like the cult of veganism that emulates like the kind of aspects of religion, when I would make the same claim of carnism. You weren't born into veganism, you are born into, you know, eating meat. A dominant ideological stance which you were told was right and just from birth. That's indoctrination. Most vegans have had to go vegan because of being questioned from having this, you know, ideological stance in the first place. So they've had to come to the conclusion that this is right and just, and actually question their implicit beliefs. Now, which one do you think sounds more religious? Being, or more culty? Being given what is, right, true, and just, or being, asked what is right, true, or just? So, yeah. Right, yeah. 6 years vegan in August. I've definitely evolved from junk food vegan to majority whole foods plant-based. God, I wish I could make that evolutionary shift. I'm going to die at the age of 40 if I keep eating the way I do. I mean, I had a curry today, but I didn't even make the curry. Like, me girlfriend's mom made it. So, Elizabeth Moore says, eating meat is not an ideology. Oh no, it totally is. But don't misunderstand what I mean by ideology. Like, I'm talking in a philosophical sense. So I mean, like, almost all of our actions are related to an ideological stance. Like, a position on like how we should live our lives is an ideological stance. It doesn't necessarily make it wrong. Like for example, I'm not saying that because it's an ideology, it's wrong. Like, you do get correct ideologies as well. It's just a way of understanding the world and understanding your actions within the world and having justifications to those actions. So, like, for example, like, driving a Tesla because you're against, fossil fuels, that's part of ideology. I mean, that doesn't make it like the same kind of ideology as, something like, I don't know, Islam. It's a different form of ideology, but ideology is far more implicit and deeper than most people give it credit. Like, ideology doesn't stop at religion. It permeates your whole existence. Bureau says, right, true, and just. Turn the mirror around and recognize how many animals die due to plant agriculture. I buy 1 cow a year that I have processed. Okay, but like, look at it like this, right? 1, do you eat plants as well? Because you're going to have to, because the nutrition you're going to get from a cow is really not going to be able to provide, like, for example, the amounts of vitamin C you'd need. So not only are you eating that cow, but you're also eating plants. You might be eating less plants, but then if we're talking about how many animals die a year, like, there are 64 million people in the UK? So that would mean that 64 million animals would have to die a year just to feed the UK. And if we look at how many animals die in agriculture, it's, and not only that, you would also be assuming that everyone would be eating, the best way possible, by only buying one animal. Then, we're talking about at least 64 million deaths just for the UK. And, like, it's just to try and explain this. Like, from what I gathered, because I did this on a debate, I think it was with SD. So it's like how many animals die from horticulture. So comparing animals' deaths from. So right. So let's have a look. Okay, so to produce, apparently this is from. Let's see, where's this from? I'll see this site. I'll try and find a more accurate one. I'll do some digging. But this site's claiming that per million calories, that, for chicken, for example, it's 251 animals are killed. Is it? No, is that in the? Let's read this graph. Look at this graph. Like, yeah, and it's also important to recognize, just so you know, that most plants are actually fed to animals. So if you want to cut down plant deaths, you could just, stop feeding animals those plants. And we don't even consider deforestation in the production of grass, because you're going to need plains to feed cows, and plains, they're not actually, most of our content, like most of our land is not actually plain land, which is, covered in fields. I mean, it is a lot in Britain today because of the way in which we've changed our agriculture, but a lot of our meat comes from places like Brazil, where we're actually demolishing the rainforest in order to, make land and room for cows to graze. Anyway, so this one says, I'm trying to work out, actually, it doesn't give, that's really annoying. I'm going to click on another one because that doesn't tell us exactly, see if I can find like a nice comprehensive study on it would be great, but apparently one of the, like, this guy is saying something about the way that it's measured is wrong, and that they're actually including deaths by other animals. Why is there no information on how many animals actually die in this? Because I read it a while ago, like I did actually do, like they brought this up, and it was something like 3,000 or something was estimated a year. It's like a few thousand. And compared to the millions of animals that actually were dying. I've been meaning to do a video on this, so if you're interested, just subscribe, and I'll do a video on this anyway, because I'm doing it this week. So it might just make it easier to do it that way, and that way you can actually see like a full comprehensive video on it, rather than me just making an ad hoc response now. But essentially, yeah, like from the research I've seen, like I can't find it right now, unfortunately, but I will find it for this video. So, like, here's the points that I'm just to briefly characterize. We have no other means of survival than eating plants, right? If we don't eat plants, then we're going to get unhealthy and die. You can be a carnivore if you like. I'm wholly unconvinced by that as a healthy means of survival. That being said, you might be able to survive to, let's say, the age of, let's say, 50 or 40 or something along those lines, and in which case we can we can discuss like whether the lifespan reduction was justified if it saved more animals, which I think in some respects it actually would be. But anyway, so moving on, we'll just quickly just skip over that, and we'll say that both diets are nutritionally equal for the sake of it, and which diet would, kill more animals. So we'd need a minimum of, 7 billion animals to die a year if we're all carnivorous. And, that's the minimum. Now, actually, a cow only produces, I think, 240,000 calories in the total, in its totality. So, I mean, one animal a year, I don't even think that you'd be able to survive off that. Technically, you'd be in a caloric deficit. So yeah, you can have a look at that. I mean, anyway, let's just say one animal, and that would be 7 billion animals. Now, if this doesn't include any of the deforestation or any of the farming methods involved with protecting livestock, because we protect livestock from predators and hunt coyotes and stuff. And so individuals are eating just one cow that miraculously does not get harmed in any such way. And, the whole farming methods are absolutely totally fine. Now, on the other hand, the farming methods we use for to horticulture are killing, I'd say around, I can't remember, I think it was like 3,000 something animals a year in Britain alone. And, Britain doesn't produce most of the grain. But let's say we're going to have the statistics, but I remember saying it was much smaller, because almost all of the grain that we produce today is being fed to livestock in the first place. So if we didn't feed that livestock that grain, we could absolutely demolish how many farms there were. And this isn't even including other farming methods. We're looking at like the worst possible scenario, which is contemporary farming in a capitalist state, which is trying to maximize profit without consideration of animals. But if we adopt an animal ethic, in which an ethic that appreciates animals as sentient beings, then clearly we would recognize that we need to modify our farming methods to protect wildlife. And remove the way that we approach pesticides and the way that we approach harvesting and so on like that. So I think that a lot of this can actually be resolved in the first place with the reduction of speciesism. And also, it's what you're buying into is an ideological stance of cruelty and exploitation. Like, your actions, because of the way you're actually behaving in the world, there's no let's just imagine let's manage to say that there was you'd have to have basically a vegan ideological stance tied into the actions of carnivorism to give the same ethical outcome, in which people would be evaluating and changing the world in regards to the values in which they have appreciated. So it's almost like what you'd be saying really, is that we need people to value animals to such a high degree that they become carnivores. Now, I'm yet to hear carnivores, for the most part, talk about the implicit value of an animal life. But if you want to go down that path, I suggest you start talking to your carnivore friends about how much cows matter, and that the only reason that you kill one cow a year is because of how much you care about rats. Because that's kind of the conversations you should be having. I'll never hear anyone talking like that. Bew says, I get my cow from a small organics farm, I think, where they are all only fed grain. Well, yeah, the fed grass, not grain. Right. Well, look at it like this, Bew. What you are saying is that unless you're saying that you are an exception to the rule, in which we would say that in which you're saying it's okay for you to be carnivorous and everyone else be vegan, and you're saying that's the way to do it, or you're saying that everyone should be carnivorous. I guess there would be a few issues there. You'd be saying that, how would we differentiate the individuals in the first place, the ones that could do it? It would probably be monetarily, in which case, prices for meat would go skyrocketing up. I have no problem with that. But then, I suppose the only other way that I think the argument would entail, is that there definitely wasn't a more ethical way to obtain those products for the same price as well. So then we would be disregarding more expensive, crop cultures. You would be disregarding the possibilities of growing your own, or buying locally grown, what's the word? There's a veganic. What's that? What are that? Bloody. It's totally slipped my mind. The greenhouses, grown in greenhouses and stuff like that, where it's isolated from the animal populations. So I just don't think, if you're saying that in this situation it's actually just your ability and your means then that we are considering, then I would ask you, are you doing the most ethical considering your means to buy plants? Do you have the means to buy more expensive plant foods? Do you have the means to grow your own plant foods? And we could talk about the individual responsibilities, but if you're talking about on a universal scale, I'll round this up better in a video. But I think that not only will more animals die, but ultimately what you'll see is that the way in which you'll express an ethic your actions will be undermining the values they have in the first place. So yeah. let's just, yeah. So if you are interested in that video, like I've been meaning to, I have been meaning to like make a video on this in the first place, like for a while. I'll be doing that like this week. So if you are interested, like just keep an eye out and like subscribe or something. And, you know, you can unsubscribe once you've watched the video, but, you know, watch the video and, you know, if you want, like afterwards, we can have a debate on it. Like if you want to defend eating grass-fed, local, organic, and we can just have a chat.
I don't have any, like, because when you say dog, you presume that
Maybe you'll feel differently about dogs than cows, right?
I don't really.
You don't feel like, yeah.
Yeah.
But for this hypothetical, I'm just gonna say dog, just for the sake of it.
Because it's man's best friend. Yeah.
And shoot the dog in the back
Say
of the
cat. I like cats.
Cats, yeah, here's a cat, a nice
I
kitty.
like cats. Yeah.
And I'm gonna shoot the cat in the back of the head. Will you try and stop me?
Yes, I will try and stop you. Of course.
So you feel that there is an ethical.
But it's funny, like it's almost like he had to consider whether he would, but I don't think he was considering whether he would actually stop him, but probably more like, what am I going to say within this language game that we are now in, knowing that his response will be, you know, essentially what is the difference between cats, dogs and cows and pigs and farm animals, and knowing that he's had to try and formulate a response for the next question. And it's funny, like the games in which people play in regards to these questions, and it's almost like a psychological event in and of itself.
Issue with the killing itself, not just the suffering.
Yeah, I guess because you're stopping a life in it.
That is actually a really good point to make. Like a being has an innate desire to live. Just from having a desire, like it's implicit rather. Like if they have any desire, then it's underpinned by their life. Like they can only express that desire by being alive. That's why, like, you know, this idea of fight or flight responses, or, you know, pain and pleasure, it all ties into the ability to actually survive in the first place. It could be possible. Like you could imagine a being that evolved in such a way that like it didn't have a desire innately to live, so like a specific desire that to fight for its own life, and it just accepted its death. That's our choke. But then, even so, it doesn't mean that it would be justified. You'd be justified in making such a decision that you could overall negatively affect the possible utility that would have occurred if you'd have let it survive. You'd have to give an argument that you were justified in killing it, like essentially euthanizing it. That's why I think I said with SD, I was like, if you come across an animal like eating another animal, like, and you shoot it in the head, you're not doing the wrong thing by shooting like an injured animal that is dying painfully in the head. Like killing that is not the wrong thing to do, because it was going to die anyway. And what you are doing is you are saving it from a life of like increased negativity, of increased overall suffering. And so taking that pain like from its existence is justified within your judgment. But killing an animal and then claiming that, you know, it could have went either way, that's just an appeal to ignorance. And I don't think that can ever be justified.
It's tracks, basically.
Absolutely. So in that sense, is killing an animal for, say, food, for eggs or dairy, whatever it is it unethical regardless of how we do it?
Yeah, there's no ethical way of killing an animal or slaughter.
What would be the barrier, say?
I think a good point is, because he's a vegetarian, is there's no such thing as a vegetarian industry. Like, we don't keep, you know, chickens like after they're spent. We don't keep cows when they don't produce milk anymore. These animals, even if we did keep them, then they become such a burden on society that we'd end up going vegan, because the prices of these things would be so high. And even in the production of these products, like, there has to be deaths, like within the sexing of chickens, and, you know, the the impregnation of cows, then the production of boys, and the lack of value of a male animal within these industries, ends up causing that, like suffering and death, because they have no other value but like the consumption of animal products, like the consumption of meat. So the only other thing that they can really get out of them is just essentially just maybe like something like a workhorse kind of scenario. But let's be honest, like it's still going to end in exploitation. There is absolutely no way that these industries could support the vast amount of animals that would be produced.
From you living here today and saying, I don't want to pay for animals to be hurt, I'm going to be vegan.
The things I would be guilty of is cheese and dairy and eggs, milk, things like that. So that would be the thing that I would personally contribute towards animal suffering is to eat those things. I'm sure I could live without cheese. That would be a sacrifice that I could make, and I have considered it. There was a guy singing yesterday who said it quite eloquently at the beginning of his song, and it was a song called Empathy. So Sam Garrett was singing that one.
Yeah, it's amazing. I edited his music video actually.
Oh, really?
Oh, there you go. It seems like we're kind of everywhere. Like vegans, kind of like all walks of life and all demographics. That's why it spreads so quickly, because we're able to have conversations with such a broad variety of people. Like there is not like one given person that goes vegan. It's just people who have caring and compassionate values, and they start questioning whether their actions are actually aligning with those values that tend to go vegan in the first place. I mean, don't get me wrong, you do get the aesthetic vegans, but they tend to be like the ex-vegans like Kalel, or like was it like Raw Alignment or something. They went vegan because it's cool. Like, I'm so different, I'm vegan, like look at how good I am, like this kind of virtue signaling nonsense. And they're never vegan really, because what veganism is the appreciation of the concept within the individual. It's not an outward farce, not a performance given to show I am vegan. Being vegan is in your sincerity of action, not anything else.
Yeah, he did a song about veganism. But yeah, he's amazing.
He is an inspiring guy. So
really good.
If you have chickens and you raise them, and you don't raise them for slaughter, you just raise them for their eggs. Of course, you're using you're raising the animal for a purpose, which obviously vegans will find wrong.
Sure.
But
like, this is the thing, like there's so many people that like don't know the information about like sexing, and they don't know about chickens being spent, and whether this could be universalized, or whether it would be an environmental catastrophe, and like what happens when everyone's got 100 chickens. and it just seems like they just don't they don't see the overall greater ethical implications, because they're not educated on it. Like, we're not educated on where our foods actually come from. Like, I'm saying foods quite like foods. We're not educated on animal agriculture, not educated on horticulture, not educated on these things. And that's a problem in the first place. Like, why aren't we receiving like education on food sourcing at school? And I think like, vegans and non-vegans alike should agree on that. Like, children should know where their food comes from. And I think when people realize where their food comes from, that's typically when they start thinking about veganism in the first place. Is they start realizing like, well, you're telling me that cows need to be pregnant to produce milk. Like, there are so many people that don't know that. And I don't blame them. It's like on TV and on the media, they're just pushed out as these like milk machines, where you don't know that they need to be impregnated to actually produce like all mammals, the secretions for their children, for their young. So it is so strange that we're so alienated from like reality.
I don't think there's anything wrong with that.
Okay, we'll just move further this way. No worries, we'll be here. So whether you go to a local farm, free range, whatever it is, the person breeding it at the other end, the breeder, they're killing the male chicks.
to get locally sourced things, so stopping at the side of the road at a local farm, where you can see the chickens literally running free across.
It is one of the ones that like really like kind of permeates through like local, organic, free range, as if it justifies taking the life of a sentient being because it was, free range. Okay, yeah, it lived a better life, but does that mean that you're entitled to its life? Like, just because it had a slightly like more bearable existence? It's not like this cow, chicken, or whatever it is usually given that great of a life anyway. It's not getting like treated like a king. And then you're having its life cut short at such a young age. And even if it wasn't at a young age, just its life being cut short for what? Like moments of sensory, I can't even say it. Moments of pleasure, right? Like taste sensation. Like, it's just not worth it. Like, I don't think any sincere person would say that, like, they would sacrifice their life for a moment of taste for another. And I don't think most sincere people, if they have any ethical considerations at all, would say that it was okay to sacrifice the life of another individual for taste sensation or for any other kind of sensation. And the worst part is, and I think this is the part that gets me, you don't really lose any part of your life when you go vegan. Like I don't get to eat cheese, eggs, or meat anymore. I don't care. Like, because not only do I appreciate an animal's life now and my values have been aligned with my actions to the point in which I'm no longer feeling existential guilt about the actions I'm committing, and it's almost relieved like what was this confliction within me. But also, I can eat so many vegan foods. Like, I don't even think I had tried as much food until I went vegan, and I realized, like, you know what? Like, I eat like next to no vegetables and different kinds of plants. It's so strange. Like, we're so distant from the lives we could possibly live because we are so stuck in the totality of what we are living.
Farmland, it's I think a big difference. So that's what we're going to be trying to aim for in terms of eggs and things like that.
It is fun, but
That's a good editing though. Like, just literally just cut to the chickens being like just being blended. Like, it just gets to the point. Like, this is what occurs. Like, even the sound is revolting.
Do you think that when we buy the product, we're affecting the supply and demand and contributing to it?
of course, like your supply and demand is basic business, but yeah, the whole vegan movement sometimes can be very pushy. Like, even I said, I would become vegan on a environmental basis.
It's weird that people think vegans is pushy, but they wouldn't call, like, I don't know, like what was it, like child, like, was it like people like going against like child rape or like child labor activism as pushy? Like, you shouldn't contribute to child labor. No one goes, well, that's a bit pushy. You know, like, don't tell me what businesses I should contribute to. It seems like we only get this rep in the first place because we're kind of demonized and because the ideology's out so far outside the norm. And this is what I think, like, the position really is vegans are given this position in which they are considered mad. And if you read, like, people like, for example, Michel Foucault, when he talks about madness in civilization, it seems that what is mad is considered like this idea of abnormal, and this abnormality is demonized within society. And because there's this power, there's this implicit power that runs within all of us that controls how we understand ourselves and how we live our lives. And once we start changing our behaviors and leaving the norm, we feel the gaze of other individuals condemning us and seeing us for something different to that which we want to be. And I think that's one of the big reasons with men, because, you know, you'd start to think when you're seen as a vegan, you're no longer seen as a man, you're no longer seen as a masculine man, you're no longer seen as someone who can, you know, do all of the values in which they wish to represent in the world. And you have this confliction in which you don't want to be recognized ideologically as an individual who is, for example, weak or pathetic. And I think that it's unfortunate that we have devalued compassion so much, and I'm not talking about in men, I mean like in general, to the point in which where aesthetics are now superseding our ethical lives.
And they were like, and they were like, oh, but you becoming vegan on an environmental basis, it's not good enough, kind of thing. And they were like, you have to see it from that.
Well, don't get me wrong, like an environmental basis is kind of like a good point in the sense that it's still an ethical decision-making process. I mean, I think even health is kind of ethical because you're kind of appreciating the individual, but it's all kind of ethical. But like the point is, I think the point about veganism is it's to reject speciesism, this idea that you are valuing one animal above another in the first place. Like the interests of one animal are just being like superseded totally by another. And this unjustified ideological stance that we are all given as children, that like animals are beneath us, and that's what we're trying to challenge. So yeah, like being an environmentalist does mean that you have to be plant-based, but it doesn't mean that you're necessarily vegan when you are an environmentalist. Being a vegan is essentially appreciating the lives of other sentient beings as equal to your own.
Animals' point of view. And I said, but surely you want people to stop eating animals regardless of the reason. So even becoming...
See, no, like you don't want to stop them eating animals regardless of the reason, because then imagine if we found an environmentally sound way for people to eat animals and people started eating animals again, well, then there wouldn't be vegan. There'd still be environmentalists, but there wouldn't be vegan. And this is the point I think that a lot of people don't understand. Like that everyone in society today is very much so a consequentialist. Utilitarianism's become the dominant ideological moral stance where they appreciate simply the consequences. And yet the intentions are so alienated from the individual that they don't understand that our intentions are important because of the future consequences that go beyond the act. And that's why, like, when you start going into, like, John Stuart Mill and things like rural utilitarianism, it becomes awfully clear that rural utilitarianism or threshold deontology, whatever you want to go down, aligns this appreciation of the intentions of the individual and how they will live their lives throughout their experience, and like why they make the judgments they do and the future judgments they could make in regards to the ethical considerations that are between individuals within the world.
For a different reason other than animals,
so
it's not good enough.
Yeah. So
I just feel like
I think I agree. I think if the behaviour is exactly the same, your motivation doesn't matter. If someone goes vegan,
nah, he's absolutely wrong. Like absolutely wrong. Sorry. Like don't get me wrong. Like if you lived a whole life where your behaviour was exactly the same, it doesn't make it more ethically the same, in the sense that you could be doing, like, let's say, like children from 100 years from now, veganism will probably be their everyday normal existence, and ethically that treatment towards animals will probably be almost identical. But the difference is that an individual who grows the concepts of their institutions helps end the suffering that is continuing within their lives that they could have prevented. And it's this understanding that being ethical and a good person is what we are advocating for. We're not just advocating for a single consequence. We're advocating for people who try to make the best position of the world we live in, make the best out of it, and try and appreciate the world we live in and the people that are actually around them and the individuals and the lives of sentient beings and sentient creatures. And that's what it's about. It's not about just, what happened and how did we get there? Because, some awful actions have led to some, pretty okay consequences, some awful intentions. Like for example, would you say that Hitler's action was as noble when he killed himself as if he had have been killed by his barber who was a Jew? I wouldn't say it would have been. It's not as if Hitler was killing himself because of this understanding of the concept and, why we should be moral and what he was doing. And he wasn't, ending his life out of the implicit love that somebody would have had for, let's say, humanity when they killed Hitler. Instead, he was ending his life out of fear and cowardice, out of being caught. That's if he did actually do that, because some people say that he did escape in a U-boat and it got sunk. So, regardless, the point of the matter is whether he was actually being selfless in the sense he was being a good person and a good individual, or whether he was just being selfish, and whether that matters, and whether this intention actually affects the overall ways in which we approach our behaviors and our reality. And I think that it's clear once you leave a single action, once you go like beyond a thought experiment that goes, okay, well, with everything else being equal, all that changes is the states of mind of two individuals. What's the difference? It's like, okay, the states of mind are worth next to nil, really, but except for the fact unless they're expressing their subjectivity, which is why we do ethics in the first place. But let's just imagine, like, whatever reason, they think they're both expressing subjectivity in the same way. Now, and even in the same way, we'll say, the reality of the situation is that, I guess they can't be expressing subjectivity in the same way, but yeah, so the reality of the situation is that it is the freedom and justice within the individual's intention that underpins their future actions and their future behaviors. And that's why ethics it's about behavior. It's not about just something, it's not a description of what is happening or what has happened. It's about how we will approach life.
Spiritual reasons, I don't care. But I guess maybe the point they make is you could go vegan for health reasons and still buy leather, still go to circuses, still go to zoos. So it's only veganism, ethical veganism, that leads to non-animal exploitation in other areas of your life other than food.
No, you see, there you go. Like, it's this idea, like, there is points in which, you know, it doesn't align with the ethic. But I still disagree with the breach of intentions. Like, it's just, I mean, don't get me wrong, he's pretty much said the same thing, but it's almost as if, like, people nowadays, they don't understand that consequences aren't all that matter when it comes to, you know, how we will approach and express who we are.
Okay. But yeah, I'd have probably said the same thing as you a while ago.
Sure, I get you.
Would you say that purchasing eggs, if you're contributing to that, is that going against your own morals?
Yeah.
And, you know, this is just one thing.
That's honesty, though, isn't it? Like, sincerity, like, it's going against, like, what I believe is, you know, good, what I believe is right.
There's so many things that happen in these industries that are hidden from you, we don't know about, and good people pay for this to happen because they don't know any better. It doesn't make you a bad person, it doesn't mean you're trying to hurt animals, it's just like we're sort of indoctrinated, I guess, from a young age into eating these foods. Love dogs, but eat chickens, eat pigs, eat cows. Do you think that being vegan would be more in line with who you are as a person?
Yeah, probably, yeah.
Do you think that...
No, it's quite sincere, isn't it? It's quite decent to be able to admit that. Because, I mean, once you say it, then it's hard to just double back, isn't it? Like, hard to just go back and go, you know what, I don't want to be vegan, like, even though I said I should be vegan. Like, you know that's going to cause you guilt. Then in that acceptance of that, like, of that reality and that, especially this verbalization, because I think when you make something into words, when you put something into words, it becomes, like, much stronger within your mind. It becomes a much more potent idea. Well, it becomes an idea itself, I think. I think until that, it's just a way of thinking. It's a conceptualization, and I think it can be easily dismissed if the links are severed again. But when it's put into words, it becomes an idea, and that idea and the memory of that idea reinforces this concept in which you've learned, and it comes to make you understand how you need to change your life and how this isn't acceptable anymore.
Are any moral justifications for what we do to animals?
No. What we do, no. But what other people in other countries do, yes.
Because survival.
For survival,
yeah.
Of course.
But then, like, I feel like a lot of people point towards culture then, and that doesn't justify it. Like as I said before, like, intentions and consequences are innately bound up. It's like, don't get me wrong, like, I would say that ancient man could not have known slavery was wrong. That does not make slavery okay, though. It just makes us understand that slavery was a part and a way of life to individuals of a certain time period, and that their ability to justify behaviors and understand why their behaviors were that way related to concepts that were far, like, outdated for today. Like, for example, like piety and concepts of, you know, how to live a life as a Roman, for example. it's very different, the concepts that they would have applied to their lives. And so, like, to build someone up from that ethical stance to the ethical stance we're in now would be like taking someone from, pre-Newtonian physics to quantum mechanics. And I don't think people appreciate, like, the level of conceptual growth that has actually occurred within humanity. I think it's astounding. It's a whole other way of thinking and understanding yourself.
So in the West, would you agree with me in saying that what we're doing to these animals is immoral and can't be justified?
Yeah, it can't be justified.
So in that sense, then, is not being vegan, is that contradicting your own morals and values?
Yes, because I know I know I should be vegan.
Well, thank you so much. I know it's kind of a tricky subject. Sometimes
See, like, they're quite sincere, like, as people, like, genuinely. Like,
but you guys were really open-minded to it, so thank you. I'm Jack, by the way.
So it's the way you address veganism as well.
I didn't know he's called Jack. There we go.
Yeah, and you've done it in a really
Thank you so much.
way. It's been
Yeah.
like you've shown us a clip, but you've not been aggressive, and I think that's a big
and that's the thing. We're not here to judge anybody because I was eating this stuff my whole life.
Yeah.
My whole life I was doing this, and it's just because we don't know what's happening. And if we did,
That's something I think I'd have to work on. Like, I don't think I am aggressive, but, like, I feel like I don't come across as, like, necessarily mild-mannered either. And maybe I need to be more, like, because I think I project my voice. And I need to make sure that I don't seem like I'm yelling at people. Like, I'm like, stop eating me! This is wrong!
no, you wouldn't pay for it.
It's good that you're raised and aware.
Thank you so much. Enjoy your day. Thank you.
But I just find it very difficult.
Sure. What
I think, like, you want to go, like, will you continue buying these products, or do you think that you'll, consider buying these alternatives? And then I think it's good to give them a way to learn how to be vegan at the end, rather than just shake the hand and send them on their way. Because, like, the how is just as important as the why. Because if they don't know how to be vegan, they're just going to go and buy those products. And, like, if you can give them a resource that points them towards, like, a way of life and a way of living that is more ethical, rather than just, a nice, existential crisis, and then tell them to toddle off, or they're an ethical tragedy right now almost, and I think what they need is guidance, in the sense that they need a resource in which they can ask questions and have answers for, to the really basic questions we all had when we went vegan. Like, people like Happy Healthy Vegan did a good job of answering mine. And they were who I was watching when I first went vegan. I'm like, how the hell am I going to do this? What can I eat? What is it that vegans eat? And I knew that vegans could eat healthy, whole food diets. But at the same time, I'm like, oh my God, I do not want to just eat plants all the time. Can I get, like, vegan junk food? And then me prayers were answered, like, when I started realizing, like, Pringles are vegan. They even got a vegan tick and stuff like that. So, like that's why, like, me and Laura did videos on, like, all these foods are vegan. And we did this, like, supermarket, like we just went through, like, every aisle and we're like, this is vegan, this is vegan, this is vegan. Just so people realize, like, there are so many foods out there that if you have a quick scan and you understand, like, how to read the label, you understand, like, whether the food's vegan in the matter of, like, 10 seconds.
What is the barrier there?
I'm currently living at home.
I don't think you can say that when you're that age. I think that's just lack of, like unless there is, like, a real threat to your livelihood, like, your way of, like your what would it be, like, your security or something. There's no reason why you couldn't eat vegan at home. Unless, like, for example, someone buys all your shopping and you have no option but to eat animal products because, you're 10. That's fair enough. Like, okay, that's, like, you can't do anything about that. And in many ways, maybe you're still vegan because of the way the vegan society definition works. If it's not possible or practicable, then you're still vegan, And this is it just seems like a half-baked excuse. Like, they just go, like, well, I live with people who aren't vegan, so I can't be vegan because I'm not willing normally to take up the disciplinary pressures that they're going to place upon me, and the judgment and the ridicule I will receive. And it's like, okay, but have some strength of your convictions. If you think it's wrong, like, and you would you cave? Would you have this kind of peer pressure if someone was pressuring you into violence against humans? Like, we're like, oh, come on, we're gonna go batter these kids. You're not coming, and they started like griefing you for saying that you're not gonna hit children. You'd be like, absolutely not. I don't want to be associated with these people in the first place. And I think your family, if they love you and that they're a good family in the first place, they should be willing to accept your ethical decisions. Otherwise, they're not respecting your subjectivity. They're not respecting who you are, and they won't allow you to develop your own identity as an individual. And that means that like they're seeing you as an object of their experience that they can control, and they're exploiting you. And your and not respecting your beliefs and your understanding of the world.
Just the ease. I remember the other day I was out in a restaurant and I was trying to look.
So the ease, like obviously that's just like convenience is a very powerful motivator on people. But it's so easy these days, so easy. Like as I said, like you say in a restaurant, like me and Laura were gonna make this video on like vegan in Newcastle, and we went round like so many places, and they've got like vegan menus like everywhere. Like there's like Wagamama, ZZ's, Pizza Hut, Pizza Express, like I'm trying to think, like even Nando's, like I don't know what Nando's is doing at the minute, but like Nudo, there was like vegan only restaurants like the Bohemian, there was Las Iguanas, there was absolutely like you could eat vegan at Jamie's Italian, which have now went in admin, but like there was like if there is a place, usually like you can eat vegan there. Like, it's rare that you can't eat vegan pretty much anywhere. Like now and again you find those places where like all you can have is like a salad and alcohol, but you know what, like I would rather go and eat a salad and alcohol than, you know, murder a sentient being. And I think most people should be willing to like a lot of people are willing to accommodate that. Like, all right, well, you know, like if someone's like, oh, but I really wanted to go to like this steakhouse, and you were like, oh, but I can't eat there. Can we not go to like this other restaurant instead? Which will probably serve the food they want to eat, whether like that, you know, meat eaters or not. And they should be willing to accommodate to some degree. I think it's so much selfish to think that like the people would not do this to like a religion, for example. They wouldn't be like, oh, well, vegans shouldn't be so fussy and picky. Or, well, like, you know, Muslims shouldn't be so fussy and picky and not eating pork or not agreeing with, like, this certain ethical stance, and so they need to go and eat somewhere where they don't eat just pig. People would be horrified if you were to make that point. Like, they'd be horrified. Like, how dare you undermine the belief system of that individual just because it's religious, but because it's not tied into a power structure, not tied into like a cultural understanding of self, then apparently it changes the value of it. When I think veganism, far more than any religion, is a more fundamental understanding of how you would like to live your life and why you would like to live it that way. I mean, you're talking about ethical concepts such as compassion that are being expressed and that are being denied recognition by like others in that situation.
For a vegan alternative, and there wasn't any.
What's more important to you, convenience or an animal's life?
What the animal's life, of course.
And what's more difficult, you not going to that restaurant and going somewhere else, or an animal living as an object and then dying for an unnecessary reason? What's more?
I think that's a really good point. Like saying like not only the convenience in an animal's life, and he says it in a really nice way, but like living as an object. That's such a good way to put it. And I think even in the way we talk about objectification, we realize that meat, dairy, and eggs are incredibly objectifying. Like, would say to someone like, you know, you're treating me like a piece of meat here. You know, like that is the level of objectification that you are impressing upon me, as if I'm only, you know, a pound of flesh. And it's like, imagine that we actually treat living sentient creatures as a pound of flesh.
An ethical concern.
The animal living in.
Absolutely.
In my head, there's no justification of of not being vegan.
Absolutely. And I was the same as you. I think when I first started looking into it, I was like, I was trying to find a way to justify it. It must be like a logical reason, because most people aren't vegan. It must be like, what's going on?
I'm not gonna lie, that was me as well. That's like everyone. You're like, how can I overcome this? This has definitely got to be wrong somehow. Like, I'm just not seeing it. The truth is, we die as vegans. Vegans are so nutrient deficient that they die after like 2 months. Like, and you start looking into this absolute, like, normally like misinformation, and you try and like justify your behaviors. And I try to do with philosophy. I was like, I start going down this route, and I'm like, what does it mean, and like to be a decent like human being, and like to be a good person, and caring about equality. Can I not extend that to animals? And it's just like, absolutely not. Like, I have to extend it to animals. There's no rational justification for this. This is inherently wrong, and there was just no way of getting out of it. So here I am, vegan, 4 years later, and it was the best decision I've ever made, because I was imprisoned by my ideological stances, and I just didn't see it.
There's no reason. There's no reason why we're doing this to them, because we don't need to. If I was to give you a card about veganism with a video, would you consider watching the video?
Sure.
Awesome. So, here's the card.
There we go. That's good. I'm glad he's did that. Like, that's ideal. Like, cards would be a good idea. I've seen like someone was doing printing that I know, and they were printing out like these like little vegan cards, like how to go vegan for like 30 days kind of stuff. And yeah, I definitely should probably get a hold of them. What the hell's going on there? You see, I think the same sort of thing, right? But imagine just for a second, like all of these people like relaxing to whatever it is, like dancing to music, whatever. But like, just imagine like the way that they would just approach if all of those speakers played the sounds of the animals they eat being slaughtered, like the emotional like response that they would have, because they would realize like that it would just breach the distance. And this is why I like the simulators, like the things like step into a virtual slaughterhouse, because I think they just break down that distance of like being in the slaughterhouse, where you can see it. It becomes like a reality where it's like the only thing that's missing is really the smell. Like, when we get smell-o-vision, guys, like people will go vegan, right? People will be vegan when smell-o-vision exists.
I'm not really doing anything. It's not that weird.
Taking a photo.
Yeah, that was something. What do you guys think of this sort of videos, like responding to street interviews? Like, I might respond to like if anyone's got like something they'd like us to respond to out of a street interview, let us know, and I'll quickly respond to that. Like, I was gonna respond to like an Earthling Ed one, but I'm like, well, he does such a good job. I'm just gonna be sat there like, wow, this guy really knows how to convert people to veganism and ask them the right questions that they really need to ask themselves their whole lives. It's like watching like a long-haired Socrates on the street. Respond to the Humane Hancock Carnivore. Yeah, I will. I'll do that. Is it worth us doing the video on grass-fed beef and the carnivore diet and that first, or should I respond to it now? Like, am I just going to end up having to get into the exact same place that I was about 20 minutes ago, trying to say like I don't have any data in front of us to make like a good argument? Raw milk cures AIDS and cancer. Oh dear God. No one actually thinks that. Come on. Like, where's that? Like, I feel like I'm going for deliberately low-hanging fruit then, though. Like, am I not just being absolutely disingenuous? Like, look at these dummies. Like, do that. One second. Also, sorry guys that I haven't been on. I had some family stuff to deal with. My brother wasn't very well, and also I looked after my mum, so there was like some problems going on there. That's why I didn't stream for the last few days. Alex is wondering, I'm wondering about the case of discussing veganism with a religious person who could potentially use his or her beliefs to justify meat eating. Well, I think, like, obviously, like what I was saying before, like, you want to get it back to the ethical. Like, you do not want this to stay in the realm of like scripture. You want to talk about, I mean, if they're going to talk about scripture, like, you want to talk about how they understand scripture, interpreting, you know, concepts like good, bad, right, and wrong in the first place that are in the scripture. And, like, does it only come from the scripture itself? Because that's a self-defeating concept. Because if it only comes from the scripture itself and it doesn't come from reason, then how would they interpret the scripture? Because that's not inherent within the scripture. So even the interpretation of the scripture itself is a rational understanding of what is written. And if, in which case, if we have to rely upon reason, then we should recognize that if we can give a rational argument that meat is unjustified, then you are forced, if you wish to continue your belief with it, or involving, you know, anything actually, that you've got to go vegan. So like, that's why I always tie like reason. It's always got to be reason, like logic. You've got to be able to show, like, with force that what they are doing is wrong in regards to reality itself. And that's the whole point of being a moral objectivist. Like, if morals are subjective, then they're not doing anything essentially wrong. And it's all like, how can I manipulate a religious person into believing, you know, that it's wrong to harm animals? In which case I might be making arguments that, like, you know, you've got to convince them that God thinks it's wrong. I'm not going to make arguments like that. I'm going to say that, like, get them to question why, like, one, why they would disregard the lives of animals. That's always, like, important in the first place. And then two, like what in the scripture is justifying treating animals this way. And then obviously you can talk about, like, the scripture itself. I wouldn't undermine that belief system. I would definitely not do that. Like, you will not get through to anyone if you start undermining the whole way of life. Like, they'll absolutely wall up. Like, I've tried this before. Like, even just talking about, like, I remember seeing this person to read, like, Kant. It was like a Jehovah's Witness. Oh no, it was a what are they called? Born again Christian. I said for them to read Kant. I was saying, like, just read a little bit. I was like, just a little bit, right? Trying to, like, inspire, like, you know, kind of enlightenment thinking. And really, there was a conversation about how they were trying to convert me to become a born again Christian. I got told I was playing intellectual games, and that, like, I was just trying to manipulate them from, like, that belief system. And all I was saying was, like, believe in God, believe in all this, but, like, make sure that, like, you can show why. And I was literally just saying, like, show why. Like, why do you have these beliefs? And unless you can say that, like, really, like, you're expressing a dogmatic view. But you can't say that of these people, because that belief is so embedded into how they understand themselves that even the slightest attack, they're just going to absolutely wall. It's going to be like, you know, you're going to be facing, like, you know, like a Roman tortoise just walking towards you with spears out, but really it's full of Christians and they're all holding Bibles. Like, with Abrahamic religions, it's difficult. Like the Old Testament, but it's only a problem when they're pre-enlightenment in the way of thinking. Like, if they're post-enlightenment, like Catholicism, for example. Like, there's some Catholics who will outright wall, like, the same. I've met them. But there's many other Catholics that, they trust their conscience, and there's a lot of Catholics who believe, like conscience is the voice of God. Reason is God-given, in the words of St. Thomas Aquinas. And okay, guys, I've only got like five minutes or so. So if anyone would like to ask a few questions, I'll make it like a solid like 2-hour stream. So you got 8 minutes, guys. He's like, ask a couple of questions, and I'll try my best to answer them. Just because I've got something I need to do. Yeah, I haven't got really other choice. I'm really sorry, guys. But yeah, like this idea of like domination over creatures, like I think Alex said, like man being given well, the first thing that man did was to give names to the animals, and like language is an implicit part of like a gift from God. It's almost like the gift of language was the differentiating feature between man and animal, which allowed them to take the decision to bite the apple on the tree of good and evil in the first place. Like, I mean, I could make an argument revolved around like the metaphor, like within the scripture. So it's all about interpretation. The issue comes is when the interpretation of the scripture is embedded within the scripture, and they say that no, we must follow this to the letter, and that there is no outside source. Now, Catholicism's never been able to do that anyway, because of the way it's been tied to the structure, of the church. And so that's why like the church was forced to change through the Enlightenment. So it's never really had to be able to like harken back to purely what the word in the Bible was said in the words. Some people do try though, but the problem is that when they point towards passages in the Bible where it's literally said like it's absolutely fine to eat meat, like I'm pretty sure I think it's actually might be Abraham. It might be Abraham, in which I think the sons of Abraham were told that they could eat meat because they needed to. Essentially, they were given like rights over animals. But yeah, like they really just say like I mean the problem is the real problem is with all of this is that you're not going to get through to someone who's an absolute like fundamentalist Christian. Like you're just absolutely not. Like there's no way of breaching a level of ideological indoctrination. I mean, like bearing in mind like some people's ideological indoctrination into religion can be so strong that they're willing to kill themselves to have like a supposed rapture. So it really does depend upon who you're talking to, and that's just about anything. So well, see you later, Twisted. Take it easy, man. Enjoy your car show. And the Twisted Hippie says the Jews at least don't eat pig. One down. We'll take what we can get. I mean, I think depending on the actual, like, there's another point, like, depending upon the religion is how much they're willing to even listen to the words you speak. Some religions undermine, like, other races even. I think even in, like, Judaism, like, I've tried to have conversations with, like, not, like, vegan ones or anything, just conversations with, like, Orthodox Jews in passing, and they've just, like, kind of blanked us. And someone was telling us that some of the Orthodox Jews, like, they just genuinely won't even interact with you because you're not Jewish by birth. And it's very strange. So there's people that like genuinely will like take the ideological stances to the extreme. But obviously that can happen anyway. Someone says, what do I mean by fundamentalist Christian? I mean someone who appreciates the Bible as the words of God. Someone who hearkens to the scripture alone, like the fundamentals of the religion, and uses them as the justification for their actions, and not necessarily employing, what would be outside justifications on top of that. Relying upon totally the scripture for their ways of life and the ways of understanding the world. I hope that explains like what I mean. Right. Let's see if there's anything else, and then I'm gonna shoot off, guys. With Trump, just to like talk about that, like kind of like Trump is Jesus. Funnily enough, I think he's I think the beautiful thing, the funny thing about Trump is that most of people's identities revolving Trump comes around from the rejection of them, and then a lot of people's identities involving Trump don't come from a rejection of an appreciation of Trump even, but from a rejection of those people who are rejecting Trump. So, like, for example, you've got two groups of people, and I think, like, for example, the MAGA hat wearing people in America, a lot of those people, like, they do that, not because they really appreciate Trump, but they appreciate Trump because of how much they dislike Hillary Clinton. And I think the people who are on the other side, the people who appreciate Hillary Clinton, they appreciate Hillary Clinton because of how much they hate Trump. And it's like both positions are kind of like ideologically construed into this position of like hegemonically, where they think that like the way that they behave within the world has got to be one way or the other based around what they've been taught is the opposite, in the opposition. Yeah, so I'm going to go, guys. I hope you've enjoyed this format. I hope I managed to give like maybe a different insight, like what I would have said. And I'm going to try and do some street outreach, like street activism, maybe upload it and see, what people think. Hopefully I'm able to have an impact on individuals on the street. I don't know how well I'll do. Obviously I talk quite like philosophically, and I think sometimes I maybe need to tone that down. But we'll see. I think university would be quite a good place. A good place to go. Just quickly, someone says the media lies about Trump non-stop. Try watching more independent media. Oh no, you don't understand. Like I genuinely have an inherent distaste for all politicians. Like I think they're all evil, and I think I've got a good reason to think that. So maybe I'll do a video in the future of why I dislike them all. Trump as an individual, the policies that he advocates, and the values that he even advocates that are supposed to apparently underpin what he does. Distasteful, and his actions even more so. So yeah, thanks everyone for coming, and thank you Twisted for moderating, and so I'll catch you all next time, and remember and as always, try to gain some perspective.